Well, there are many victories during the New York City primaries, and of course, Mayor Bill DeBlasio won the Democratic nomination for his reelection. Ruben Diaz Jr., or I should say Jr., won in the borough president's race here in the Bronx. Ruben Diaz Sr. won for Council District 18. And here now to discuss the winners from the New York City primaries. We welcome now the owner of Retrovision Media, our political commentators also, Lee Bynes, and good to have you.
Good to be back as usual.
Listen, let's talk a little bit on this local front. What does it mean, of course, Mayor Bill DeBlasio winning handily in his Democratic primary, much saying that have said the mayor deserves a whole lot of criticism for his first term in office, but it looks as though he's on his way to a re-election bid.
Well, you know what? Rather than delve into the obvious, because you're going to get that pretty much everywhere, let's take a different angle on this. He won by a landslide. There's no question about that. But when I added up all of the numbers by all of the contestants or the people running against him, it was pretty meager, to say the least. And if you go across all of the candidates who run, the incumbents, et cetera, those vote totals were extremely, extremely low. Now, I know that BronxNet has done a really fabulous job. Give you a little kudos there, too, because over the weeks leading up to this election, you guys did a lot of work in terms of trying to get people interested, get people out to vote, get people off their butts and in the voting booth to make their voices known. The problem with the situation is that in New York, they have a closed primary system. So in other words, if you're not a Democrat, you're locked out of participating in that process. That being said, since more people identify as independents as opposed to Republicans or Democrats, that's a huge chunk of people who did not participate in the election. If you add in apathy or the folks that have just given up, or you add in people who identify as Green Party members, Social Democrats, et cetera, it didn't really, I don't think that this election really points out, or can you possibly calibrate how people really feel about what's happening. Now, DeBlasio won. In fact, all of the incumbents won simply because of the fact that they had the money behind them, they had name value, and they had the organization. When you have all of those things going in your favor, it's awfully impossible to dislodge an incumbent. Now, I can say with a certain degree of confidence that DeBlasio is going to be the next mayor. This is a Democratic town. If you look at all of the races that were run.
And Bronx is highly Democratic, 90%.
Highly Democratic. And all of the top races that we would be looking at, such as public advocate, we have our own J.C. Polanco running as a Republican against Ms. James. I seriously doubt that he's going to make some headway in there. I wish him all the luck because he is a really, really good guy, met his kids and everything like that. And you can judge a man by the children he raises. He's a good man, but he's got his work cut out for him.
Well, let's talk about this for a minute, because when you talk about the low voter turnout,
yes,
obviously a lot is to be thought about. You know, given the fact that the heightened state of political tensions, people would think that there'd be more people turning out to the polls now than ever before. We did not see that. We didn't see that in New York City. We didn't see that Westchester County. We didn't see that really in many of the primary races across the state where we thought that possibly numbers would be up. Those numbers are still down. What are we to say about that?
Well, you know what? I have one classic example that I'd like to offer. And that's possibly because anybody that's not a Democrat, it's going to be difficult for them to find their way into the party. And I believe we can go back to even 2016 when Hillary Clinton ran and lost. I think it comes down to the quality of the candidate that's running. And the Democrats had a guy out there, Hiram Montserrat. Now, this individual had one heck of a miserable background. He had already been convicted on charges of domestic abuse. Specifically, he slashed his ex-girlfriend's face. And he was also thrown out of the Senate because of shenanigans with the money. In other words, he had corruption charges against him. Now, a person with a background like this still found his way onto the ballot. And if Democrats can't field better candidates or than someone like him, then I think they're going to have a difficult time moving forward down the line. You have to have people out there that has a message, has a background, has a history that will definitely excite people, give them a reason to come out to vote. So whether or not it's apathy or people who have just given up on the American political process altogether, we won't know. We won't know that until the next major election turns around in 2018 and or
Any prediction that we have going
2020.
forward towards November? Because I mean, you talked about Hiram Monserrat. Full disclosure, he was here on the show and he talked a little bit about his candidacy. But yet and still, he said that there were voters who really were behind him. Obviously, we saw the numbers as of yesterday. But can we predict possibly a greater turnout come November, or is it just people are just not so into the primaries and we'll see somebody more at the general side?
Well, you know what? If history is any guide, I would say that the turnout during in November shouldn't be too much larger than it is right now. What you saw in these primaries will probably be indicative of what you're going to see going down the line. Again, it falls back to the same thing: the candidate, the message, and the person's character. Those are all things that count a lot. And until we can find some people with some, I don't know, real personality, just your garden variety politician coming up and pitching a platform is just not going to do it. And again, I don't want to put down the fact that the platform. I think a lot of voters now are smart enough not to look at the politician, but look at the platform that they represent. And once you look at the platform, if you can agree with the platform, then you have to agree with the character of the person that's going to move that platform forward. And there's not very many people out there right now that can make that happen.
Well, I wanted to recap some of the numbers, and I want to take a quick look at some of these numbers here. And when we look across our district or districts that affect the borough of the Bronx, we saw that Councilmember Andy King, he was able to come out with 7,563 votes. Mark Jonai comes out with 3,326 votes. Fernando Cabrera, 3,617 votes. Rafael Salamanca, close to 4,700 votes. Ruben Diaz Sr., almost 4,000 votes. And those are just the councilmatic races that we see here in our borough. And as you can see, with the exception of Councilmember Andy King, who got close to 8,000 votes, every other race saw about half of that coming out for their candidate.
I wouldn't say that 7,000 votes was more than anybody else in these contests. However, if you take into consideration that the Bronx has 2 point some odd million people,
1.4 million. Yeah.
Well, out of a number like that, I would expect a better showing.
Yeah.
Just a little more attention being given by the average voters. But if you look at the Bronx right now, the Bronx is a poor borough. It's struggling economically on all levels. If you're going to get people out to vote, you got to give them something to vote for. In other words, talk to their passions, talk to their need. And I didn't see a lot of, I'm not sure about you, but I didn't see a lot of ads on television. I think the politicians pretty much took the voters for granted. So a lot of ad buys were not made in this campaign process.
Obviously, the bite didn't match the bark on this one here. And
not this time.
Not this time. Lee, thanks a lot. Going to take a quick break. Got more shows. Stay with us. We'll return with more, including a discussion on immigration and the latest with DACA.